United Airlines cares more about a pilot's race than their skill. Steven Crowder puts himself in George Floyd's position. And this week has been a terrible week for the prosecution in the Derek Chauvin trial. I'm William Hall, and this is The William Hall Show. All right, welcome back to the show. Lots to get to. Going to be covering a lot of what's going on during the Derek Chauvin trial, the George Floyd trial, where they have all of the information coming up now. It's all coming to light at this point. I mean, we've been told by the media that this was a clear-cut trial, that this trial was so easily determined that there was no way that any outcome could change whatsoever. I mean, we saw the video, right? We saw the 8 minutes that then turned into 9.5 minutes of this officer with a knee on this guy's neck that didn't deserve anything. He was just being so nice, and he was talking about his mom. That's what we were told by the media, by the way, that this was a clear-cut situation. We had everything on video. There was no disputing it. That's what they sold it as. And I think that's a lot of the reason why so many people are so upset now that we are seeing more and more details become available to us. That's what's really happening. This trial has opened a lot more of this can of worms, this idea that this trial is simple. It's not simple at all, come to find out. And we're going to go through a little bit of why that is the case. So starting off, you have George Floyd's friend. Now, this is the guy, by the way, that sold George Floyd drugs. He was his dealer. And we brought this guy up before. Many people have talked about this guy, but he basically refused to testify in the Chauvin case. Well, okay. Now, let's keep in mind, this is the guy who allegedly gave George Floyd a fake $20 bill. The same fake $20 bill, by the way, that caused for him to get the police called on him in the first place. So he sold him the drug cocktail as well, and he's refusing to testify in the case because he's worried that he's going to incriminate himself and be responsible for a possible third-degree murder charge. Well, okay. I mean, that actually makes sense here. Think about it. The guy is kind of culpable in this entire situation. George Floyd's friend. I mean, he literally is his dealer. He gave him the money that got 911 dialed in the first place. So according to George Floyd's girlfriend, this is Courtney Ross, on one occasion, when she took pills believed to be bought from this guy, the drug dealer, by the way, the drug dealer's name is Maurice Lester Hall, and she said that she felt like she was going to die after taking his drugs. That's not a good way to look at things right there. That doesn't really work out for the prosecution in this situation. So George Floyd's girlfriend also revealed that Floyd had been hospitalized twice in March. On one occasion, due to a drug overdose that saw him hospitalized for 5 days. She said the March pills did not come from Hall, but the other ones apparently did. So, once again, you have this situation where several people are basically saying that this dealer has either dealt them bad drugs that made them feel like they were going to die, and the dealer's basically saying that he doesn't want to do anything at all. He's going to plead the fifth. He's going to refuse to testify because he may very well wind up being hit with a third-degree murder charge. So, in Minnesota law, by the way, third-degree murder charges can be brought against someone directly or indirectly involved in providing, selling, or bartering controlled substances to a person who subsequently succumbs to their consumption. So, yeah, I mean, he has a right to obviously plead the fifth, but it's not looking too good for him either. And it just adds to more of what's going on in this case, that drugs were definitely a major part of this. As much as the mainstream media wants to ignore that fact, it's there. It's in the autopsy. We have evidence, and the people that actually did the autopsy literally said that if they basically had found George Floyd lying there on the street, same place and everything, in the same situation, but they didn't have a video of what had preceded that event to sway their opinion, they would have 100% said it was an overdose that he died from. Because there was zero evidence showing that it had anything to do with a knee being on his neck at all, which we will be getting into as well, because this detail here is probably one of the biggest revelations that's actually come out of this entire thing, this whole trial. Because you have this guy, And this is the MPD Lieutenant Johnny Mercer, and he's a use of force trainer. Okay, so this was the prosecution brought this guy up as a witness, by the way. Okay, so he works in the MPD training division in charge of use of force training and policy instruction. He was active or at least in that capacity, during the period preceding the Floyd events, during which Chauvin would have received his department use of force training and policy instruction, which is why this guy is relevant. So it would have been his training and his policies that were in place during Chauvin's active duty and during this actual incident, okay? So Mercer is the prosecutor's witness, and Eric Nelson is Derek Chauvin's attorney, just so we have an idea of what's going on here. So this is what happened when Nelson cross-examined Mercer. This is what typically happens. The prosecution brings forward a witness, and then that witness can be cross-examined. They can be asked questions directly from the defense as well, and that is what I'm going to be going through a bit here. So here's some of the dialogue and the situation of what happened. This is all, by the way, able to be found on legalinsurrection.com. They're mainly covering this story, and I'm just kind of going through some of the most important sections of what took place here with this guy. So once again, this dialogue is specifically between Derek Chauvin's attorney, the defense, basically cross-examining, questioning this use of force trainer that the prosecution brought forth as a witness that they would assume, obviously, if he was brought forth as a witness from the prosecution, that he would somehow in some way help their case. But in this case, it actually wound up backfiring in a major, major way. So let's get into this. So basically, as noted, Nelson also explored with Mercer whether there were circumstances in which it would be appropriate for an officer to maintain a neck restraint for a substantial period of time. And Mercer conceded that there were. So that's check one mark off the list there, where there are circumstances where you're going to need to restrain somebody past that time. And this guy that's doing the training, remember, this Mercer guy is the training, use of force, policy person, and all of that, okay? He then goes on, and so it says, sometimes to maintain the neck restraint for however long it took EMS to arrive, asked Nelson, and that was a question Nelson asked to Mercer. And Mercer answered that he personally had maintained restraint on suspects for the duration required for EMS to arrive. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but I was a 911 dispatcher for about almost 2 years. My dad was in law enforcement as well, but this happened all the time. Whenever there was a situation where somebody had some type of medical condition or something like that, EMS, firefighters, all of them had to basically stage in a kind of a holding area, maybe a block or two away from the incident, so that police could basically get the situation under control. This is important because EMS firefighters do not have guns. They don't have the training to deal with grappling people that are resisting arrest. They don't have the training for that. So when you have these types of situations that are going on, it's always something that happens. The EMS fire, they always stage in a situation that you have here. So the idea is that George Floyd had to be restrained in order for the situation to be gotten under control. That was what the police officer felt like needed to happen. And EMS and firefighters can't administer aid to George Floyd until they realize or figure out that the situation has been mitigated, that he's not resisting arrest and not lying and doing all the rest of this stuff, as well, by the way, as the bystanders, the people that are standing around in the crowd as well. That's something to take into consideration. So it goes on to ensure the point. The state's own use of force expert testified on cross-examination that he personally had engaged in use of force conduct that the state had been using to demonize Chauvin as an unlawful killer. That's not a good day for the state. So that's one of the big kind of check marks as well in this situation. So Nelson also, again, re-emphasized the reality that the officer involved in a use of force event must consider not just the suspect, but also the presence of an angry and growing mob observing what might look like as an ugly use of police force, and Mercer agreed that that was the case. So once again, the crowd matters. It's not just the state of George Floyd, but the state of all of these people that are upset, that are cursing at the officer, things like that. They're going to say, hey, we're not going to bring EMS into this because this crowd is dangerous as well. So it goes on the issue of providing timely medical care, an issue the state pushes with particular energy. Nelson had Mercer agree that while MPD policy is to provide care as soon as possible, that must also take into consideration the safety of the scene, and that the MPD policy actually requires that it first be safe for the officer to provide care before the officer has the duty to provide that care. Indeed, factors such as whether a suspect had just been fighting with the officers was huge in determining whether an officer could reasonably provide care, especially if that care would be chest compressions, which would require that the suspect have their handcuffs removed. So Mercer answered in the affirmative, agreeing with those statements there. It goes on to say, it was at that point that Nelson showed Mercer a series of photographs captured from the body-worn camera of Officer Lane and showing Chauvin's knee on Floyd from the angle down on Floyd's prone body. Now, the reason why this is important is because I covered this in a separate video. It wasn't in the show. But there was a different angle from the police officer, Officer Lane's position. He was right by Derek Chauvin during the restraining position of George Floyd. And you could actually see from that angle, his knee wasn't on his neck at all, at least for a significant period of time. It was actually on his shoulder blade, which is once again, throws a humongous wrench, a massive hole in this knee on the neck narrative. They want to keep pushing this over and over again. Knee on the neck, knee on the neck, knee on the neck. However, we're continually getting more information that shows that his knee was probably not on his neck at all, actually. So that's what he's actually referring to here in these pictures that he's showing him. So basically what he's going on to do is talk about the situation with these photographs. And he says, are there circumstances like those already discussed where it would be appropriate to maintain a presence on the leg across the shoulder blades and the back in order to ensure control of the suspect? And the Mercer answered, yes, it is. And then he asked for as long as 10 minutes. And then Mercer also said it is possible. In other words, the use of the restraint can be justified not only to compel compliance of the suspect in the first place, but to ensure that the suspect maintains compliance moving forward, obviously. And that's not just for the safety of the officer, but also for the safety of the officer's partners, for the bystanders, and even for the suspect themselves. That it's for their own good, in other words. So all of this stuff basically winds up throwing a massive, massive hole into the prosecution's case, because the guy that they brought forward as a witness did such a bad part, I guess, a bad job at proving the prosecution's case, and really sided so much more with what the defense has been saying so much in this entire situation, that they actually were literally trying to recall that witness. Like, hey, we don't want you back anymore. And actually what might wind up happening is the defense might wind up taking on this witness, and he just winds up switching sides, because this witness basically was showing the facts, showing what actually was taking place, and the prosecution was mad. They were mad because none of the stuff that he was saying was what they wanted him to say. So that's a pretty big development there as well. Another thing that we have to take into consideration, for example, is just some of the numbers we've seen over the last year. There's been a 33% increase in homicides just over the last year. Now, the reports that I've read on this, CNN was the one reporting this initially. Of course, they're going to come out and say, well, there's nothing to really point to. It's just the way things are. But come on. I mean, let's look at this realistically here. Crimes are going up because police officers can't do their jobs, and criminals know that. Criminals know that they can get away with just about anything they want to get away with right now, generally speaking, within reason in some of these areas, and that police officers are limited in what they can do. And when police officers are less respected, when they're limited in what they can do, especially to restrain people, and they're worried about maybe losing their entire livelihood and being shamed for the rest of their life no matter what they do, they're not very apt to do their job very well, basically. Criminals know that, and they're taking advantage of it, and it's happening in all of these major cities. So actually 63 out of the 66 largest police jurisdictions saw increases in at least one category of violent crimes in 2020, which include homicide, robbery, aggravated assault, among others as well. You don't think that this has anything to do with the fact that they are demonizing police every single day? I mean, police are afraid to do their job. It's obvious. You know, there's this other lady here, a prominent Black Lives Matter activist, if you want to call it that, to be honest. But she threatened that cities were going to be on fire if Derek Chauvin basically didn't get convicted of a crime.
If George Floyd's murderer is not sentenced, just know that all hell is going to break loose. Don't be surprised when buildings are on fire. Just saying.
You know, there's a very fine line between activist and terrorist. And this is a perfect example of that. I mean, these people, how is this activism? This isn't activism. These people are burning cities to the ground. They're domestic terrorists. We've been saying this since last year, by the way, but this isn't activism at all. And these people think that that's the case. I mean, we know what's going to happen. I think that the cities are going to burn regardless of what happens because it's never enough. It's just like the woke mob. It's never enough for them, right? At any given point in time, it doesn't matter if he gets third degree or manslaughter charges or whatever. They'll say, well, he didn't get first degree murder. We knew what it was. He should have gotten first degree. There's no way they're going to have evidence to prove first degree. They're not even trying anymore. But even if he got first degree, they're going to say he should have been killed. He should have gotten the death sentence. They're going to be mad no matter what happens. And the crazy part about all of this is that the way that the left-wing people have set this up is in their minds to be a win-win. But I don't really think of it as a win-win necessarily. So first of all, think about it like this. This is the way that the left is going to see this. If Chauvin is convicted, then you're going to have Sharpton, Black Lives Matter, all of them are going to celebrate the victory and say that the battle against systemic racism has been won, at least to some degree. Okay? If he is acquitted or gets a really, really lesser charge, something that they don't like, then they'll just say that it's further evidence of how deep the systematic racism goes in our justice system. That's the way they're going with this right now. And to me, that's extremely disingenuous, and I think it's actually going to backfire on them. I don't think they're going to be able to get away with this for much longer. It really is just a bad take at this point to be in the situation of where the Democrats are. I think they've painted themselves into a bit of a corner, and I hope that after all of this stuff is said and done, that most people wake up and realize what they're doing. So Steven Crowder put himself in George Floyd's position. And I mean, literally put himself in George Floyd's position. Check this out.
What I'm telling you is this. This is unpleasant.
It
but
looks
that's
unpleasant.
Yes, but so is prison.
Yeah. Well, it depends on...
Well,
Right,
there's
look,
a lot of unpleasant
move
things.
it back to my neck if you get the picture. Whatever you guys think is this close enough? I don't want people to say that I'm not doing it. So
No,
I can't.
I think that's...
Oh, I think people are going to say plenty.
Yeah, they're. I think you're fine
right there, right where that knee is. Right
That
there.
seems to be, from this
Pretty
angle,
close.
the proper position.
Yeah, I don't remember if he had his right knee on his low back, is what I'm saying. So that's the thing that I think
That's
is a
the
little
part,
bit different.
too, that
Oh, the
is
right
different,
knee?
Yeah, I think that right knee, I don't know. Just leave it where it is for now, because if anything,
don't
it's
know where he
worse
had it.
for you, Stephen, because it's constricting breathing more by having it there than it would have been on
Yeah, no,
on
this
Floyd.
is probably worse.
With the right
you're
knee, at
saying that
least.
his right knee was on the ground, that would be less weight on Floyd.
Right. So
6 minutes
leave
to
it
go.
there.
My point is, does he feel any straining from you? Does he feel anything that would indicate that you're suffering?
I don't
At
know. Hey,
all.
Token. Hey, yeah. And by the way, I don't think the guy was on his legs for the whole time either.
I don't know. I
Wasn't he
can't
on there
tell
for
you.
only a portion of the
He
time?
was only on there for a portion of the time, and then he was holding his legs more with his hands than anything
Okay.
else. So,
All right.
Yeah.
So how long was that? Should we do that? Should we have Brendan?
So, of course, that's just a little bit of what took place. But the point here is that you have Crowder putting himself literally in the position of George Floyd. Something that a lot of people on Twitter got so triggered by, of course, as they always do, just, pretty much about everything. But let's think about this for a second. This is genius because somebody needed to do it. I mean, it's so easy sometimes to look at something out in the far distance and say, look at this video. It just looks bad. It just looks bad. Look, I don't care how bad it looks. What you're dealing with right now is something that has to deal with convicting a man of something. And if we're going to do that, there needs to be examples of how this actually played out. Somebody needs to really put themselves in that position to see, is this really the case? If you're watching this, listening to this on the podcast, basically it's this video of Crowder where he put himself on the ground, had one of his people that works for him put their knee on his back, neck area, exactly the same way that George Floyd had that done to him for 9.5 minutes. And the point that he was trying to make is that, not that is it comfortable, because of course it's not comfortable. So there's actually a statement in here that he made in the video saying, the point is the drugs, the agitation, the actively resisting arrest, the 3.5 times lethal dose of fentanyl matters. I don't expect this to be pleasant, but I think people need to see what it is like with the closet of controlled conditions that we can recreate as far as body mass, weight, to see what it actually might be like for somebody that is not in an agitated state, significantly overdosed state. That's the point. That's the point here. If what Chauvin did couldn't kill somebody that was not OD'd on drugs, then he's not responsible for that person's death. It is the way that it is. because that's what we're having to look at here. These details absolutely matter. It's a restraint position. Of course it's uncomfortable. Of course nobody wants to be sitting like that and in that position for 10, 15 minutes, but it wasn't meant to be comfortable. It's meant to restrain somebody. It was doing its job. The question is, can that alone kill a man? And what he's proving is that it clearly cannot. And Crowder's not in the best health either himself. So really just goes to show that this stuff is being blown way out of proportion. So, a lot of people, once again, on Twitter, they're upset at this. They're mad. They think he's making a mockery of it. I don't think so. I think somebody needed to do it because too many people are looking at a video, catching some feelings on it, but not looking at the results, not actually looking at what it would be like if you were in that position. And he kind of advised at the end of it, everybody should kind of do this if you have an opportunity to do that, to really see what it was like, because a lot of people is going to change your opinion of what actually took place and whether they can literally kill somebody or not. So just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can donate directly to the show, and please remember to leave a review if you're on Apple Podcasts or any of the other podcast networks. Alas, even our airlines are woke now. And there's this new report about United Airlines that is saying that now 50% of the next 5,000 pilots that they train, they want to be black women or women of color, or just people of color in general. And that's so disingenuous. It really is. So they're saying that diversity is at the forefront of its new pilot program. You know what I would really like to be at the forefront of your pilot program? I don't know, this thing called skill, this thing called proper training, the ability to do what they're doing and to be the best at it. I think that is what matters a lot more than someone's skin color. If they're not hiring the best qualified, I don't think anybody, including myself, would want to fly with them at all. I know that I wouldn't. I mean, that's kind of scary, right? To get on a plane, knowing in the back of your mind that this pilot could be somebody that actually has a lot of skill, or it could be somebody that got in through their diversity program. Let's let that sink in for a bit. What happened to a good old meritocracy? What happened to being good is what gets you into being able to do whatever you want to do? You don't need these types of things to take place at all. Here's the facts. Here are the facts behind this entire situation. Certain careers, this is what the left loves to ignore, by the way. Certain careers have certain biases towards sex and different races of people. It's amazing how that works, right? Number one, we have to look at something very obvious. The actual percentage of black people as a total in the United States is definitely less than 15%. Okay? So when we know that, why would you expect 50% of people in a pilot program, of all things, to be black women or people of color? Do you see the problem there? When you know these statistics, when you know what the actual percentages are in the everyday population, it makes it very obvious to anybody that's paying attention that there are going to be other people of different races, but mainly white people, that are going to have opportunities literally stolen from them because they wanted to achieve a certain percentage. How is this not just airline affirmative action? It's basically what it is, right? You're just giving a bunch of advantages to people that don't deserve the advantage just because you want a certain statistic to be there. Here's the thing. Look, you want to get your little underwater basket weaving degree from woke university, whatever. Do your own thing. You can bring in as many people as you want through affirmative action. Nobody cares. But there's a real issue when you start talking about somebody that's literal job is holding a bunch of people's lives in their hands at one time. Hundreds of people at any given point in time. You don't want to have people flying planes that were brought in solely because of their race. Even if they're brought in from the bottom of the class. The fact is that somebody else that was better, that just didn't fit the skin color look that they needed to have, is going to lose that opportunity, all because they needed a certain percentage of people of a certain color. I want the best people doing the best job. That's what I want. I don't want mediocre people. I don't care about anyone's color. And I don't think anyone else cares about people's color because we want people that do a good job. If you've flown a lot, I've flown a decent amount. If you've flown a lot, you know for a fact that there's a difference between good pilots and bad pilots. Okay? I think we all can probably relate to that to a certain degree. It's no fun being on a plane when you know the pilot is a little sketchy. because they land a little hard, they take off a little sketchy, maybe they're making some weird kind of turns or whatever it is. But when you have a really good pilot, they're good at communication, everything's smooth, it's fast, they give you accurate updates, like it's awesome, right? We've all been there, generally speaking. So I don't want a situation where you have more of these pilots going in that have no idea what they're doing, all because they needed a percentage to fill. And I can assure you that if there's any low amount of percentages of people that are just even applying to be a pilot in their program, I would assume that the lowest amount of people you're going to get are going to be black women and just black people in general. They're probably just not that interested in being a pilot, guys. And even if they could, which obviously they can, anybody could if you're actually, willing to put in the time for it, why do they need a helping hand? I mean, that's a bit disrespectful, is it not? Knowing that you went through a program, wanting to achieve something, and knowing that you were put ahead of someone else solely based off the color of your skin and not the actual work that you put in. That's not a good look for any company whatsoever. So there's this woman that was on this elevator and she literally had a massive mental breakdown because somebody wasn't wearing a mask, but she actually was wearing a mask. It's kind of really weird.
My girl here wants me to come out of the elevator so she can come out of the elevator.
Because it's a small space, we're supposed to maintain social distancing. I don't understand why you can't just politely step out to allow me out of the elevator when I asked you nicely while you have been wearing your mask.
You didn't ask me nicely. You said get the f*** out the elevator.
I said that after you refused
no.
to get out. You have a giant box.
My girl.
No, look at you.
Oh, my girl. Hold on. My girl. You want to stand in the elevator with me? And catch it, like, you're not making sense, and you might as well get up at your floor.
I'm trying to get off the floor. I can't come close to you. Do you not understand that I have an extremely compromised immune system? You are a delivery person incorrectly wearing the mask inside of a big building.
Is this incorrectly worn, guys? Is this incorrectly worn?
It wasn't like that the whole time.
By the way, this is what happens when you're brainwashed by society so much that you've basically lost your mind. I mean, come on, lady. This is crazy. For somebody that pretends like they care about a mask so much, I mean, look at her hands. They're all over the mask the entire time. If she really cared about it, why is she touching it like crazy? She's telling the lady she was wearing it improperly when she was wearing it perfectly fine the entire time. I mean, this is insanity. Because these people don't know what they're doing. I mean, if I was them, if I was in that room with that girl, I'd tell her, like, hey, stay at home. Why are you even here? If you're this crazy in public, just literally stay inside your home and order everything to come there. Because otherwise, what you're doing is just losing your mind over the stupidest stuff. And to add to that, we have this new report from the CDC, and they've changed their opinion on something again. Now, the CDC is saying officially on their site that only 1 in 10,000 chance, if you actually are touching a surface that has been touched by somebody that was positive with coronavirus, are you going to actually be able to contract coronavirus from it. So what they previously stated, and it said in their statement that they've made clear that the COVID-19 is a respiratory disease transmitted mainly through human-to-human interaction, but noted last spring that it may be possible that a person can get COVID-19 by touching a surface or object that has the virus on it and then touching their mouth, nose, or possibly their eye. So the idea was that you could get it from a surface. Now they're saying the CDC website is citing several studies at this point, and they're suggesting that the risk of the COVID-19 infection via the fomite transmission route is low and generally less than 1 in 10,000, which means that each contact with a contaminated surface has less than a 1 in 10,000 chance of causing an infection. That is very, very, very important data that has been, I guess, just neglected to be mentioned for the past 365 days. Now, CDC has obviously continued to miss the data. They've messed up the data. They've misreported the data. And obviously we know things are going to become apparent to us as time goes on. But a lot of this stuff, notice that every single thing that the CDC has backtracked on has generally been, oh, it's actually not as big of a deal as we thought it was. Oh, this thing, it's actually not that major. Oh, it's actually not that dangerous in this situation. Everything has been that way. Nothing has come out that said it's actually more dangerous than we thought. It's almost like the CDC now is saying the stuff that we were speculating was the case a year ago. I remember the skeptics are basically being proven right. And I guarantee you a year from now as well, we're going to go back and we're going to say, wow, man, the people that were there at the time from the very beginning were pretty much right. The skeptics had a right to be skeptic. And now we know everything is to be a fact. All because we just simply had to wait for the CDC to get their act together. I mean, just imagine what the case would be, what our country would look like in general and everything, if we knew this information and the CDC reported on this information last year. And was accurate instead of just assuming stuff and making everybody panic like that lady in the elevator. What would happen then? Of course, the people that need to hear this stuff won't hear it. That girl in the elevator doesn't know any better. She's probably thinking that the virus is just as bad as they were reporting it was in the very beginning, back in March last year. And I highly doubt that. I've been saying this for the longest period of time. White liberals are oftentimes the most racist people you'll ever meet. And they think that it's not racist, but it really is. Because they've gotten to the point, as I've mentioned previously on the other shows, where they are advocating for segregation. Because they think for some reason that that's exactly what black people want and or need. But here's this clip showcasing exactly how racist they are. It's a perfect example of the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Do you have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist.
I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as to say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely. Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No.
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so like we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. Like, that's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with.
I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that. It's on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
And you see it right there at the very end. If you're listening to this on audio, at the very end, you have them asking specifically black people like, hey, can you get an ID? Can you go to the DMV? Can you do some basic things like get on the internet? And they're like, of course we can, because, human beings, right? Well, left-wing people don't believe that, literally. I mean, Joe Biden just a few weeks ago said that black people can't get on the internet. We can't expect them to do that. If we did, they wouldn't be able to do this. So if we don't make it as easy as it's so easy that a caveman could do it, then black people just will not be able to do it. Meanwhile, ignoring the fact that he's basically comparing black people to cavemen. You get the idea. And the whole point here is that this left-wing ideology, this idea that you're seeing in this video play out, that clearly shows how racist they are through this, is integral. Not just a part of, it's integral to the left's agenda. It's integral to how their ideology functions. See, the left and the way that they do this is that their version of equality is unequal. They have to assume that you are too stupid if you're a minority, that you are too poor if you're a minority, that you are not as smart if you're a minority, and that they need to just help you out. Meanwhile, they'll say, well, but we're all equal. It's just black people can't use the internet. They can't vote. They can't get an ID. They can't do this. They can't do that. Wait, what? Yeah, but we're trying to help them out so that they're equal, so we're all equal together. Yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it? See, it's only on the conservative side of things that we are actually saying to people that everyone is capable of doing everything that they want to do. We're going to make the achievement bar, or the bar is going to stay the same for everybody. That's the equality. Whether you're a man, woman, black, white, or anything else, you have to achieve this to do whatever this thing is. You want to be a doctor? Here's the metric. Meet it. We're not going to lower it for you and this person and that person and whatever it is. And we can help people, but there's oftentimes a better way to look at things if you look at socioeconomics, like the amount of money they make, versus something stupid and arbitrary like just skin color. And the fact is that They want to pretend that they're all for this equality, but they're not for the equality at all. And this video is perfectly highlighting everything that I'm saying here. So with that being said, I thank you for watching this video, and I will see you on the next one. You just watched an episode from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.